Hey there newbies, it's Tim Trich here from Internet Blueprint. Welcome to the channel. So recently I was able to get my hands on one of the UNAS Pro devices from Ubiquiti and get it fully set up and integrated into my network. So what I thought we would do today is just kind of give you an overview of the product, share with you guys how I've been using it personally, what my thoughts are, as well as some of the firewall rules kind of behind the scenes that I've had to set up to make it all work and function. Now in my case, I generally wanted a NAS for network file sharing. That's what this device is built for, and it does a great job of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I've also been able to use it for my Unifi Protect camera archiving, like archiving the footage from my Unifi Protect device, as well as storing the media for my Plex server. I've had a few people ask me about that in the comments, so we'll kind of give you a brief overview of how all that's set up and how it's been working for me. If you guys would like to see a deeper dive on any of this, please let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to try and carve that out and really show you the process more from start to finish. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for today's video, I am not going to be showing you guys how to set this up step by step by step. There are other videos out there on YouTube that do show this, so I just, in the spirit of time and not wanting to waste yours, I'm just not going to show that. Those videos do a great job of showing you the screens you get and how to get it online and working in your system. Now, what I will tell you is that I chose to put this in my main network VLAN. Okay, so that's one question I know a lot of you have. Where should I stick this thing, right? So I chose to give it an IP address that's the same as my phones and my computer in that secure zone that we've created as part of some of the other videos. So this is going to pull the same IP address as my computers and phones as part of that. Now, because I'm using it with Plex and with Unifi Protect, that means I had to open up some firewall rules, which we'll get to later in the video, and I'll show you how that part worked. However, primarily this device is network attached storage. That's what I'm going to be using it for. And so I wanted it to be on the same network as my computers, as my phones, as the devices going out and retrieving and sending those files, just so it didn't have to go through firewalls to do that. Now, that being said, that is not the only way to do this. I know a lot of people who isolate their NAS and they'll stick it on its very own VLAN. So it's kind of on its own little island, and then they just open up access as need be. But I chose, based on how I plan on using it in my home, I just felt it was easier to go ahead and stick it in that home network. So I will leave that up to you on how you want to do it, and we'll get into more of that and the configuration here a little bit later in the video. All right guys, so let's just take a look at the interface here real quick. Again, this is not meant to be a deep dive, but it is to just kind of generally show you how I've been using the product so you guys can, see what you think. So out of the 7 drive bays, I do have 4 of them used. They're all 4 populated with 8 terabyte hard drives, and after you work in RAID and everything, I have almost 24 terabytes of usable storage on the device. Well, way more than I need, but it's going to work really well. As you can see, I'm only using 125 gigabytes of that. However, I haven't moved my files from my Synology over to this yet. I wanted to use it for a little bit and kind of see how I liked it before I kind of took the plunge and did that. I do have this connected via 10 gigabit into my switch, so we do have a 10 gig backbone, and like I mentioned earlier, this is in my main home network, the same VLAN that I have my computers and my phones and the stuff I use every day. That's how I chose to use this device. Because I'm accessing these files from the computers, I figured it would make sense for me to put it in the same VLAN. That way they just have direct access. It makes it really easy. However, as I also mentioned, I do have my camera VLAN and my IoT VLAN talking to my NAS because it has to be able to use it for those other functions we mentioned, and so I'll show you that here in a little bit. We're not doing any backups. This section is basically if you want to back up your entire NAS to either another Ubiquiti NAS or a Synology or a different type of NAS or even some cloud storage, you can do that here. Very, very easy to set up, but nothing I have done so far. If we go over into the all files, you're going to see the files that I've created. And so every time you create a user, that user gets a personal drive space. And so when my user was created, I got my own personal drive, and that's what this is representing right here. These are folders that I have created, one of which was for Plex and the other one was for my archiving for Unifi Protect. Okay, so that's where those particular things are saved inside the NAS. Okay, and then I created a user for my wife so she could have her own personal drive. And then for today's video, I'm actually going to create a Trich shared drive that both her and I have access to, just so you guys can see how easy that's done. And we'll go ahead and turn on snapshots for that as well. So just so you guys can kind of see that. So we'll go ahead and click on Add Shared Drive. I'm just going to call this Trich Files. Okay. It doesn't like spaces. That's why I use the underscore. I'm not going to enforce any size limit. I already have access because I'm an admin to the system. And so to add Emily, I just got to click on Add Users. She's the only other user I've added. I can make her an owner or an editor or just a viewer, but I'll just leave her as an owner. It's okay. And we'll go from there. So once I do that and I click add here, I don't need encryption turned on. Encryption isn't anything I'm using. I think it's a great function, but it's nothing we use here. So we'll go ahead and say add, and now you can see there's a Trich file and there's 2 people who have access to it, which is really great. And turning on snapshots for that is very easy. So we can actually go ahead and just click on the Trich files. I can go over here to protections, turn on snapshots. I don't need 256. I'm just going to say 10. We're going to do it weekly on Sundays at 3 in the morning. And again, no encryption, hit apply. And now snapshots have been turned on for the Trich files, which is really, really cool, right? Now, if someday down the road I need to edit things, I can absolutely do that by just coming back to this screen, hitting the Trich files, going over here and adjusting the settings. Maybe I need to adjust Emily's permissions or something, or add my kids in here to be able to access the Trich files. I can do that at any time very, very easily just by coming back to this area here. You got quite a few settings in here. You can kind of manage your snapshots. I did try out this shared links. I think it's pretty cool. What I actually used this for was like, hey, I shared one of my movies so I could download it offline on my cell phone just in case maybe I was going on a flight or something and I wanted to be able to watch a movie. It worked awesome. I got an email. I clicked on it. It allowed me to download the file locally on my phone and I could watch that offline. Yes, it did use part of my local storage on my phone, but if I was on a flight or something, didn't have internet, gives me the ability to watch a movie, work flawlessly on there. And then once I'm done with it, I can delete the link, get rid of it, set up new ones, drop new files in there. It really is a simple interface. They've done a great job with it. This is just talking about some of the services. We don't need to go into any of that. And there are push notifications to let you know if something's wrong with the system. If anybody's interested in this, let me know in the comments and we can go from there. And like I mentioned, creating a user is what allows you to have a personal drive space. So if my kids decided they need their own personal drive because we wanted those files protected and backed up, we can absolutely do that. So to get there, you go to admin and users, go to users, and then just create a new user. First name, last name. Email is, you don't have to put an email address in if you don't want to. And then this is where you would click to add their credentials or username and password to be able to access their files. And then you can choose what they actually have access to. If you want to add shared drives and you want to give them access to the Trich movies or the Plex movies or the Trich files, I can do that as I'm adding the user. Really, really simple. So guys, the interface is great. It's done a good job. You can kind of see how I'm using it. Now let's take a little bit deeper dive into the Protect archiving so you guys can see how that worked. All right, so the first thing I needed to do was to work on the NAS side first. Let's go ahead and create the NAS connection, where we're going to store these things and how we're going to log in. So let's do that first. So we're going to go over here into the all files. Now it's very similar to how I just created the Trich files drive. I've already created a Unifi Protect archiving drive. There's nothing fancy about it, right? But we are going to change something here as part of today's video. I'm actually going to give this its own login. Now the reason I'm choosing to do it as part of this video is I think in a lot of cases a best practice is that if you have a service like backups and things running, it's nice to use a service login. So if you change your password, these other services don't break. You know what I mean? So you want things to kind of keep functioning in the background so you can make changes and it doesn't affect it unless you want it to affect it. So for this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a user and give it access to this Unifi Protect archiving folder that I've created. Now the reason I already created it and I'm not creating it as part of this video is because I wanted some files in there to show you what it looks like. So I have been archiving for a little bit already to show you what this would look like, so we're not just setting it up for the first time. So we're going to go over here down in the settings. We're going to go to users and admins. I'm going to go ahead and create a user. Okay, so you guys are going to see this. This is going to be Unifi NAS admin. Okay, we'll just do that. All right. We'll call this NAS admin. Okay, and we'll give it access to Unifi Protect archiving, and we'll make it an editor. That'd be fine. Should be able to work with it as an editor. So we'll create that user. All right, and there it is. So now we have our folder created and we have our user created. Now, in this particular case, I need to do my firewall rules next, and here's why. In my setup here, I have a UNVR, a completely separate device that sits inside my camera network. It has the same IP address as all my cameras, and it is managing my camera network. Okay, so that is my controller. That is where things are being backed up to currently, or being recorded to. If I want that device to be able to archive its recordings to my NAS, I need to give it permission, because right now my camera network does not have access to my home network. Okay, so in order to do this, I'm going to set it up as kind of a one-to-one relationship. I'm not going to open it all the way up. I'm just going to let these two devices talk to each other. Okay, so let's do that real quick. All right, so we're going to go over into the network side of things, and we're going to go to security, and we're going to go down. This is going to be an unsecure zone rule to a secure zone rule. Okay, so I got to make this smaller so you guys can see. There we go. So we're going to be going from camera to secure zone. So we're going to go down here. This is the from, this is the to. We're going to click on that, and I already have this created. So again, I've been testing this. So basically, this is the rule that we created. Allow the UNVR to the UNAS. I'm basically, if I click this rule, it's basically saying this device, specifically my UNVR only. I'm not using the whole zone. I'm not doing the whole network. I'm doing one specific device, is allowed to talk to my secure zone, specifically 192.168.2.50, and specifically on port 445, the SMB port. Okay, I left everything else as any, and I hit OK. Now make sure that allow rules towards the top so it gets executed correctly. But now when I go into my Unifi Protect and say, hey, I want to add a device to archive, my UNVR now has access to do that. Before, it would have just spun and spun and spun, and it wouldn't allow us to connect until that firewall rules was created. So now we know it can connect. So let's go into our Unifi Protect system and turn on the archiving. So we're going to go into Unifi Protect. We're going to go to, I was already there, but basically you're going to go to settings, into settings, and then you're going to go to system, okay? And then you're going to go to archiving. Now this is a relatively new feature. That's why you see this labs thing here. I consider it beta testing. So, enter at your own risk. If things don't work or the features aren't 100% there or working, that's why they're working on it, trying to make it better. But if we hover over the little eye, it says automatically upload and store camera recorded events in real time. That's exactly what we want to do. So we need to link an account. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to say add account. And you can see you've got some options here. You can do Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, whatever. We're going to do a NAS. Okay, so we're going to say next. Now we have to enter our information. So first we need to enter the IP. So 192.168.2.50. Now that we have access, specifically on port 445, and we're going to use our new login, NAS admin. Okay, enter the password, connect. There it goes. It says it's connected. Please select the folder you want. So it's receiving the list real quick based off of the access that user has. Hopefully this doesn't take super long. There it goes. Drop down, Unifi Protect archiving, confirm, and enable. Now you can choose which cameras you want to do it. You can do all of them. You can do what kind of detections you want. If it's just certain kinds, you can kind of go nuts. And then it says, where do you want to archive it to? I'm going to go ahead and say there and hit apply changes. These are all the settings you get. You don't have overwrite protection where if it gets so full, it'll overwrite. You can't keep so many days. It's just on or off. That's just kind of how it is, at least as of today. That's how it is. So hopefully they'll add some of those as you get going, and you can kind of tweak your retention rates and say, I want to be able to go back this far, and anything before that they can just wipe off. But today the retention rates aren't built in. So that's kind of one of my things I hope they add, because right now it's just going to record and record forever and slowly just fill up your NAS, and I'm going to have to manually go in and delete those. Now, let's go take a look at what they look like. So if I click on my folder here, and I got the drive down here protected, so I can, this is a folder, so I went into my Unifi Protect archiving, as you can see, okay? This folder is created by the system, so if I click on that, and then it just kind of has it broken down by day. Now there is a gap here because I changed my password, again, kind of what I was talking about earlier, and so it broke it for a couple days and I didn't realize it. So I fired it back up today. It's doing things in real time, but if you click into these, you can see any of the camera footages from certain times, and you can see all the timestamps. And like I said, with mine turned on constantly, it's just constantly recording and recording and recording based off motion events. So you can see where this can go crazy after a while. But this is what they look like when it's recording. And if I click on one of these, here's my doorbell. If I click on it, it just opens as a video file and allows me to view what was going on at that particular time. Looks like the neighbor kids were running around my driveway. So kind of a cool deal if you like the idea of archiving. I do think some cataloging and there's a better way of kind of doing this. However, this is a nice logical first step if you want to save that recordings. Plus, if your NVR died, let's say you were using your UDM Pro as your NVR, okay? Which, keep in mind, some of these settings might have to be tweaked, especially firewall settings would need to be tweaked a little bit different for that case, okay? So I'm just calling that out. But let's just say you had a hard drive go bad in your UDM Pro and you had to swap it out, you'd have all that old footage already archived somewhere else, and when you popped in your new drive, you just make sure the archiving is turned on again, and away you go. You haven't lost anything. So I think it's a really great feature. I think people have asked for this. It's just one of those things where I think it still has a little bit of work left in it, but it's a good first step. All right, so let's talk about Plex a little bit and how I had to set it up in my house, because it's a little different than if you have a Synology. With Synology, you can actually install the Plex software right on the NAS. It has the ability to install a bunch of cool applications and stuff, and Plex is one of them. So basically, you install the Plex application on the NAS itself. It sees all its internal drives. You can designate some of that space for your Plex, and it itself is your Plex server. Well, with Ubiquiti, you can't do that. This NAS system does not allow you to install any kind of applications. What you see, what I've shown you, is what you get. You see there's no area in there to be able to install an application. So what I had to do was I found a little mini Windows PC and I installed Plex onto that. Then I simply created our folder in here that had our drive in it. So I created a Plex movie folder. I dropped all the movies in there and changed all the names so that make sure it pulled down the correct artwork. And then I just had to give the PC, which is sitting in my IoT VLAN, okay? I put it in there specifically because my Fire Sticks, everything I'm going to use to access this server is in the IoT VLAN. So I wanted the Plex server to be in the IoT VLAN too. However, I needed to give the Plex server access to these files, 2 different VLANs. Remember, my NAS is in my home VLAN, right? So let me show you how I did that. So we'll go over here into the network. We'll go into settings and security. And then this is from my IoT network to my home network. So from my unsecure zone to my secure zone, whatever you named yours. So if we click in there, you'll see allow Plex server to NAS. Okay, so this is the rule I created. I only created one rule. And it basically says allow this PC, okay, specifically in my unsecure zone to talk into this IP in my secure zone, which is my NAS, on the SMB port 445, exactly like the UNVR rule that we just created that I showed you in the last part of the video. It's just allowing me to map that drive. So if I go into my PC, let me minimize this for a second. Basically, by adding that rule, it allowed me to map this Plex Movies Z drive down here. Okay, so once I had access to the movies from the Plex server, I can install the software and then add a library. Okay, so that's all I did. So I added this movies library, which we'll go in here and I'll just manage it and edit it so you can see it. I just named it movies. It's a movie type. I chose the folder. I just chose my Z drive, which now I have access to, and it is mapped, and hit Save Changes. All of the videos, all the artwork populated in there. It went through and did its thing. Took a matter of minutes, and we were up and running. Now, because my Fire Sticks are in the IoT network along with the Plex server, there's no firewall rules needed for that. All it has to do is talk to the Plex server talks to the NAS, and everything goes. Now, guys, this, when I tell you this has worked well, I even had Plex on my Synology, and I had issues with it every now and then. I'd get buffering. I'd get weird, like I'd get through a movie, and sometimes it would start over, or it wouldn't remember where I left off. I had some issues using the Plex app. Now, I know a lot of you out there have used it flawlessly, and so maybe it was something in my setup. I'm not saying that Synology does a bad job with it. But what I will say is this setup has been perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. I've had no issues whatsoever. I just went into the PC and said, don't fall asleep, you know, don't turn off the hard drive, hard disks and stuff. I turned off some of the power settings, but at the end of the day, it's just running all the time. And when I open up my Fire Stick, go to the Plex app and go to the movies section, I can see all of them. They work. It catalogs everything, all the artwork. It's been great. Absolutely works perfect. So I hope this helps some of you out there who've been wondering whether or not this can be a Plex solution. It really does work well. All right, so you may be wondering, maybe you're not, how I feel the UNAS Pro compares to something like Synology. So here's how I'll approach that. I honestly don't think they are in the same even arena of device. I just don't. This is seen as a more traditional network attached storage. That's all it's really doing. Where something like Synology, you get a ton more features and capabilities. However, you do pay for those. Now, a Synology can be many things. It can be your media server. It can be your DNS server. You can run malware protection. It can be VMware. You can do Dockers. You can do all sorts of things. There's just tons and tons of applications that you can run on it. And so it's meant to take place of having those be servers in your house. You can have that one device do multiple things. However, if you really just need some additional storage in the house, you want to move some files back and forth, be able to share things both in the house and outside of the house, and then you don't mind a workaround or two to get something like Plex working, guys, this really is a great solution. And the one thing I will say is when you look at like the hardware specs of a Plex, or sorry, of a Synology versus the UNAS Pro, you really are getting a lot of bang for your buck. At $499 with this amount of horsepower, you're getting 7 drive bays and a 10 gig connectivity, and it plugs right into your ecosystem. It's user friendly. It's just all the good things that we love about Ubiquiti. If you were going out and shopping for a 7-bay system with Synology, and I don't have any prices in front of me, and you needed 10 gig connectivity, you're going to be in the upwards of $1,000 to maybe even $1,500 before you ever buy a hard drive. So again, you pay for those features, and I just don't think it's fair to compare these. They're just not the same type of device. They really, really aren't. But I just think it just really depends on your needs and what you need it for. So that's going to wrap up today's video, guys. I hope you learned something. As always, if I didn't cover something and you have a question or you need me to go over something a little bit more, leave those comments, guys. I do read them and I get back to everybody as quick as I can. Sometimes it's a couple days, but I do try to get back to you guys. I love my community. Thanks for everything. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys down the road in a future video.